Should the date of Australia Day be changed? If the date of Australia Day was changed, it would only generate another wave of hostile and abusive rhetoric by activists. Activists often are minority groups of people that seek to change political or societal issues. However, activists often are people that promote division and hatred against everyone out of their own self-righteous bigotry and selfishness. No matter what the situation is, they will find reason to object or dispute. They seek to disrupt peace and harmony. They seek to be a persistent, unwanted nuisance to be reckoned with. You cannot reason with people that have bigotry and hatred firmly at the forefront of priority. If the date of Australia Day were to be changed, what date are we supposed to change Australia Day to exactly, that will work for everyone or not offend minority groups? There are only two possible outcomes to changing the date of Australia Day, none of which are likely to work without even further hostility and dispute. If the date of Australia Day was changed to some other date relevant to Australia's history, you can be absolutely sure activists will again find reason to dispute it, most likely with even greater, pent-up, hate-fueled motivation. They will form connections with some other adverse historical event, and again call for the date to be changed. There is simply no satisfying activists' mindset, and nor should we be trying to. If the date of Australia Day was changed to something with absolutely no relevance to Australia's history in order to extinguish the objection and division, then the day of celebration will be absolutely meaningless and pointless, further strengthening the desire for most people to still celebrate Australia Day on the 26th of January anyway. If it was changed against the majority of citizens who cherish it being on the 26th of January, that could very well start an even bigger wave of rioting, abuse, and hostility, and is certainly not the way forward for a nation trying to progress, prosper, and dismantle racism and division. Some people dispute Australia Day being on the 26th of January, as it is symbolic of the British movement to Australia, the genocide of Indigenous people, and the stolen generation. If it were not the British migrating to Australia, it could very well have been people from other nations with a far more hostile intent for the country and its inhabitants. Throughout all of human history there have been all kinds of atrocious events and repercussions for people merely out of alternate societal, religious, or political beliefs and societal expectations. It has never resulted in anything other than further trauma, hatred, division, and destruction of peaceful society. Sadly, it still occurs today in some parts of the world. Whilst the British movement to Australia and the atrocious treatment of Indigenous people is absolutely abhorrent, it is past history that cannot be changed. The Australian government has officially and publicly declared an apology to the Indigenous people on behalf of the rest of the Australian citizens for the wrongdoings of the past and has worked towards assisting the Indigenous people to live a better life.
For the pain, suffering and hurt of these stolen generations, their descendants, and for their families left behind, we say sorry.
Yet, as Australian citizens today whom have not contributed to these awful past atrocities are yet to witness any kind of act of forgiveness by the Indigenous people. An apology without forgiveness is a statement that expresses remorse without an expectation of forgiveness. It can also be a statement that doesn't express remorse or take responsibility for an action. Peaceful transition towards reconciliation for the atrocities of the past simply cannot be achieved if those whom claim victimhood refuse to offer any kind of forgiveness and accept diversity. Every human being belongs to this earth, there are no strangers to this world. People must learn to accept diversity, forgive and move forward in unity, rather than persistently dwell on the past, knowing full well it cannot be changed. How must new citizens to Australia feel when no sooner have they arrived in Australia to live a better life, and they are confronted with atrocious claims of being an invader, guilty of genocide, or immediately in conflict with Indigenous people, purely because of past occurrences? These new citizens have absolutely no connection with the atrocities of the past within Australia, yet through toxic prejudice are branded as guilty, right from the first day they become citizens of Australia. Many of the newest Australian citizens have fled from parts of the world facing very serious threats to their life, or have already lost friends and family to unnecessary war and conflict. These people are only too grateful to finally live in a place of relative peace, yet are then confronted with false accusations and labels of being an invader, guilty of genocide, or ignorant of the needs of Indigenous people of Australia. It must be so confronting and disappointing to receive such derogatory labels when they have just had their life spared and given a rare chance to assimilate into the way of life in Australia, with every intention to contribute to society and live in peace, after arriving here with little more than the clothes on their body and limited language skills. Many people from foreign countries have miraculously turned their lives around to become very successful and of huge benefit to society in Australia, yet there are people here from past generations that simply refuse to civilize and choose to forever remain the eternal victim. In Australia, there is a well-meaning movement to work towards reconciliation between Indigenous people and the rest of Australian citizens. The definition of reconciliation is the process of making two people, or groups of people, friendly again after they have argued seriously or fought and kept apart from each other. Are the Indigenous people whom claim victimhood seeking eternal compensation? Victimhood often receives compensation, however, no matter how much the Australian government and public work towards reconciliation, it seemingly never amounts to any form of progression towards reconciliation, and often prompts even further divide. When some progress is made towards reconciliation, new expectations and allegations of ignorance unfold to the point where we have essentially taken a step backwards. When Indigenous people are acknowledged and assisted to live a better, more civilized life, claims of cultural suppression, white supremacy, and colonial invasion occurs. When Indigenous people are not assisted, claims of ignorance and refusal to acknowledge Indigenous people in Australia occurs. Just what exactly are the Indigenous people of Australia trying to achieve other than further disgruntled division and toxic racist divide? Australia Day is a day to celebrate life in one of the luckiest countries on earth, a day to unite together as one unique nation, inclusive of all, a day to celebrate our very successful multicultural, multi-ethnic and peaceful society. It is not a date to dwell on past atrocities or form even further bitter division between people, and it is a date that does not seek to abandon the Indigenous people, nor is it a date for the sole exclusivity of non-Indigenous people. Despite the atrocities that occurred with the British movement to Australia, there has however been a massive improvement to the opportunity, health, infrastructure, and future lives of everyone in Australia, including Indigenous people. This is precisely why Australia Day needs to remain on the 26th of January.